Welcome to Depth Doctrine, where we examine the philosophical foundations that everyone else takes for granted. Today, we're talking about the most repeated piece of advice in modern culture. Be yourself. It's everywhere. Self-help books, Instagram captions, graduation speeches, therapy sessions. Everyone tells you that the key to happiness, success, and authentic living is simply being yourself. But there's a philosophical problem with this advice that no one talks about. A problem that Jean-Paul Sartre, the father of existentialism, identified 70 years ago. And it's this: there is no fixed self to be. The advice to be yourself is asking you to do something that's fundamentally impossible. This isn't about being contrarian or tearing down helpful advice. This is about understanding what authenticity actually means from a philosophical perspective. Because when you understand what Sartre and other existentialists discovered about human existence, you realize that modern authenticity culture is built on a misunderstanding of what we are. By the end of this video, you'll understand why the search for your true self creates anxiety rather than relieving it. You'll see how authenticity isn't about discovering who you are, but about choosing who you become. And most importantly, you'll learn what genuine authenticity looks like once you understand that you're not a fixed thing to discover, but a constant process of creation. Let's go deep. We live in the age of authenticity. Be yourself has become the ultimate moral imperative of our time. Don't conform, don't pretend, don't wear masks. Just be your authentic self and everything will work out. This message is everywhere. Self-help books promise to help you discover your true self. Career coaches tell you to find work that aligns with your authentic values. Relationship experts say the right person will love the real you. Even marketing has embraced authenticity. Brands try to seem authentic and real. The underlying assumption is always the same. There's a true, authentic you buried beneath societal conditioning, fear, and pretense. Your job is to discover this true self, embrace it, and express it. Once you do, you'll experience freedom, fulfillment, and genuine connection with others. This sounds beautiful. It sounds liberating. And millions of people are earnestly trying to follow this advice. But there's a problem. Have you noticed that the more we talk about authenticity, the more anxious people become about it? People agonize over whether they're being true to themselves. They question every choice. Is this really me, or am I just conforming? They feel like frauds when they adapt their behavior to different contexts. They're terrified of being fake. This creates a strange paradox. The advice meant to liberate us, just be yourself, becomes another source of pressure and self-doubt. We're not just trying to be successful, attractive, and good. Now we also have to be authentic while doing it. We've added authenticity to the list of things we're failing at. Why does this happen? Why does the pursuit of authenticity create anxiety rather than relieving it? The answer lies in a fundamental misunderstanding about what human beings are. And this is where Sartre's philosophy becomes crucial. The advice to be yourself rests on an assumption that seems obvious, but is actually philosophically questionable. That you have a fixed, discoverable self. That somewhere inside you, there's a true nature waiting to be found and expressed. That authenticity means aligning your outward behavior with this inner essence. This is what philosophers call essentialism, the belief that things have fixed essences or natures that define what they are. A knife has the essence of cutting. A tree has the essence of growing and producing oxygen. And according to this view, you have an essence too, your true self. But Sartre argued that human beings are fundamentally different from objects. Objects have essences that determine what they are and what they do. But human beings don't. We exist first, and then we create what we are through our choices. This is Sartre's famous claim: existence precedes essence. And if existence precedes essence, if there's no fixed human nature to discover, then the advice to be yourself is asking you to do something impossible. You can't be something that doesn't exist yet. You can only create it through your choices. Let's understand what Sartre meant by existence precedes essence, because this is the key to everything. When a craftsman makes a knife, the essence of the knife, its purpose and nature, exists in the craftsman's mind before the knife exists physically. The craftsman thinks, "I need something that cuts," designs the knife for that purpose, and then creates it. For the knife, essence precedes existence. It was designed to be a certain thing before it existed. Traditional philosophy and religion treated human beings the same way. God or nature designed humans with a specific purpose and nature, a human essence, before creating us. Our job is to discover and fulfill this pre-existing purpose. This is essentialism applied to human life. But Sartre said this is backwards for human beings. We're not designed objects with predetermined purposes. We exist first. We're thrown into the world without a manual or predetermined nature. Then, through our choices and actions, we create what we are. We define ourselves through living, not by discovering a blueprint. This is both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because it means there's no instruction manual, no true self to find, no cosmic purpose to fulfill. Liberating because it means you're radically free to create yourself through your choices. But here's the problem. This radical freedom is so anxiety-inducing that we constantly try to escape it. And this is where Sartre's concept of bad faith becomes crucial. Bad faith is self-deception. It's lying to yourself about your own freedom. It's pretending you're a fixed thing with a determined nature when you're actually free to choose differently at any moment. And here's the twist. The modern pursuit of an authentic self is often an exercise in bad faith. When you say, "This is just who I am," or "I'm being true to myself," you're often denying your freedom to be otherwise. You're treating yourself as a fixed object rather than a free consciousness. Sartre gives the example of a waiter who overperforms being a waiter. He moves too efficiently, speaks too formally, embodies waiterness perfectly. He's in bad faith because he's treating waiter as what he is essentially, rather than just something he's doing. He's denying his freedom to be anything else. We do this constantly. "I'm just not a morning person. I'm an introvert, I can't do that. This is who I am. Take it or leave it." Every time we treat our current patterns as fixed essences rather than chosen behaviors, we're in bad faith. We're denying our freedom. And this is the deep irony of modern authenticity culture. In trying to be yourself, you often engage in the exact self-deception that prevents genuine authenticity. When you search for your true self, you're looking for a fixed essence that would relieve you of the burden of freedom. You want to discover what you really are, so you don't have to constantly choose what to become. You want authenticity to be a destination you reach, not a process you engage in. But this is impossible. You're not a thing with a fixed nature. You're a consciousness that's always choosing, always creating itself. The true self you're searching for doesn't exist, not because you haven't found it yet, but because it's not the kind of thing that can exist. This doesn't mean authenticity is impossible. It means authenticity is completely different from what modern culture tells us. Genuine authenticity isn't about discovering and expressing a fixed self. It's about honestly acknowledging your freedom and taking responsibility for your choices. Understanding Sartre's insight helps explain why so many people feel trapped by their identities even while claiming to be authentic. You identify as an introvert, and suddenly you have an excuse to avoid social situations that make you anxious. You identify as not a math person, and you stop trying to understand things that require quantitative thinking. You identify as someone with a particular personality type, and you treat this label as a limitation rather than a description. These identities feel authentic. They feel like you're being true to yourself. But from Sartre's perspective, they're forms of bad faith. You're treating temporary patterns and preferences as fixed essences. You're using identity as a way to avoid the anxiety of freedom. The same thing happens with finding your passion or discovering your purpose. These phrases assume there's a pre-existing passion or purpose to discover. But Sartre would say you create your passions through engagement, and you create your purpose through commitment. There's nothing to find because it doesn't exist until you make it. This is why people can spend years trying to find themselves without success. They're looking for something that isn't there. They're waiting to discover their true nature instead of creating themselves through action and choice. Modern social media has made this even worse. Now, we don't just try to be authentic. We try to appear authentic. We curate our lives to seem real and unfiltered. We share vulnerable moments to prove we're genuine. We perform authenticity for an audience. But this is doubly in bad faith. First, you're treating yourself as having a fixed authentic self to express. Second, you're performing this supposed authenticity for external validation. You're seeking confirmation from others that you're being real, which means your authenticity depends on their approval, the opposite of genuine autonomy. Sartre would see this as a perfect example of living for the look of others. You're defining yourself through how others see you rather than through your own free choices. You're treating their recognition of your authenticity as proof that you have a fixed self, when actually you're just conforming to their expectations of what authentic looks like. But there's another problem with Sartrean freedom that explains why we desperately want to believe in fixed selves. Infinite possibility is terrifying. If you're not anything in particular, if you're pure freedom without a predetermined nature, then you're responsible for every choice you make. You can't blame your nature, your personality, your past, or your circumstances. At every moment, you're choosing who you're becoming, and you're responsible for that choice. This is what Sartre meant by condemned to be free. Freedom isn't a gift, it's a burden. It means you can't escape responsibility. You can't hide behind, "This is just who I am." You're creating yourself at every moment, and you're accountable for what you create. This is why we invent fixed selves. Having a true self to discover would relieve us of this crushing responsibility. If you're just being who you really are, you're not choosing, you're expressing. And if you're expressing rather than choosing, you're not fully responsible. But this relief comes at a cost. You give up your freedom. You trade the anxiety of infinite possibility for the comfort of a fixed identity. And then you wonder why you feel trapped. Interestingly, Buddhism arrived at a similar conclusion through a completely different path. 25 centuries before Sartre, the Buddha taught anatta, the doctrine of no self. Buddhism argues that what we call the self is actually a constantly changing process, not a fixed entity. You're not a thing that experiences life. You're the experiencing itself, always flowing, always changing. There's no permanent essence beneath the flux. When you search for your true self, Buddhism says you're chasing an illusion. You're trying to grasp something that doesn't exist. This creates suffering because you're fighting against the fundamental nature of reality, which is impermanence and change. But Buddhism offers something Sartre doesn't, a practice for living with this insight. Instead of the anxiety of infinite freedom, Buddhism teaches acceptance of constant change. Instead of creating yourself through choice, Buddhism teaches letting go of the illusion of a self that needs to be created or discovered. The Buddhist solution to the authenticity problem is radical. Stop trying to be anybody. Stop clinging to identities. Recognize that you're a process, not a thing, and find peace in that recognition rather than anxiety. Nietzsche had yet another take. He agreed there's no fixed human nature, but unlike Sartre's anxiety and Buddhism's letting go, Nietzsche celebrated self-creation. For Nietzsche, the absence of a predetermined self isn't a problem. It's an opportunity. You're not discovering who you are. You're creating a work of art. Your life is your canvas, and you're the artist. The question isn't, who am I really? But, who will I become? Nietzsche's concept of becoming who you are sounds like a paradox, but it makes sense in this context. You become who you are not by discovering a hidden essence, but by creating yourself through your choices, and then owning that creation. You make yourself, and then you become what you've made. This is closer to genuine authenticity than the modern version. You're not pretending to discover a pre-existing self. You're honestly acknowledging that you're creating yourself, and you're taking responsibility for what you create. That's authentic in a way that finding yourself never can be. Martin Heidegger, Sartre's philosophical predecessor, had perhaps the most nuanced take on authenticity. He distinguished between authentic and inauthentic existence, but not in the way modern culture does. For Heidegger, inauthentic existence means living according to das Man, the anonymous they. You do what one does. You believe what people believe. You want what everyone wants. You're not making your own choices. You're conforming to social norms without questioning them. Authentic existence means confronting your own mortality and freedom and making choices based on that confrontation rather than on social convention. It's not about expressing your true nature. It's about honestly facing the fact that you're going to die and that your life is yours to shape. Heidegger's authenticity isn't about being true to a fixed self. It's about being true to your situation. You're a finite being with limited time, thrown into a world you didn't choose, and you have to decide what to do with that. Authenticity means facing this honestly rather than hiding in social conformity. This is much closer to what authenticity should mean. Not expressing a discovered essence, but honestly confronting your situation and taking responsibility for your response to it. So if there's no fixed self to discover, what does genuine authenticity look like? It's not about being true to who you are. It's about being honest about the fact that you're constantly becoming. Real authenticity means acknowledging your freedom. It means recognizing that your current patterns, preferences, and identities are choices you're making, not fixed facts about your nature. It means understanding that you could choose differently at any moment, taking responsibility for continuing to choose what you're choosing. This is uncomfortable because it removes all your excuses. You can't say, "I'm just not that kind of person," because you're not any kind of person, essentially. You're whatever you're choosing to be right now. You can't blame your personality, your past, or your nature. You're free, and that freedom is terrifying, but it's also liberating. If you're not a fixed thing, you're not stuck. You can change, not by discovering your true self, but by making different choices. You don't need to find yourself. You need to create yourself, and you're doing that whether you acknowledge it or not. Genuine authenticity means taking full responsibility for who you're becoming. Not in a guilt-ridden way, but in an empowering way. You're the author of your life, not because you're expressing a pre-written script, but because you're writing it as you go. This means being honest about your choices. When you stay in a job you hate, don't tell yourself, "I have no choice." You're choosing to stay, probably for good reasons. Financial security, fear of change, uncertainty about alternatives. Own that choice. When you avoid social situations, don't hide behind, "I'm an introvert." You're choosing to avoid them, probably to protect yourself from anxiety or rejection. Acknowledge that choice. This honesty is more authentic than any amount of being yourself. You're not pretending to express a fixed nature. You're acknowledging your agency and your reasons, even when they're uncomfortable. Here's the practical implication. You don't find yourself through introspection or self-discovery exercises. You create yourself through action in the world. Sartre emphasized that we are what we do, not what we think or feel or intend. Your identity isn't created by your inner experience. It's created by your choices and actions in the world. You become generous by acting generously, courageous by acting courageously, authentic by acting honestly. This means the question isn't, who am I really? But who am I becoming through my choices? You don't need to find your passion. You create passion through committed engagement. You don't need to discover your values. You reveal them through your actual choices, not your stated beliefs. This is why action is more important than self-reflection. You can think about yourself endlessly without learning who you are, because there's no fixed self to discover. But when you act, you create yourself. You become what you do. Embracing contradiction and change. Finally, genuine authenticity means accepting that you'll contradict yourself, change your mind, and become different people in different contexts. This isn't being fake, it's being human. You don't have to be the same person at work and at home, in public and in private, at 20 and at 50. You're not betraying your authentic self when you change. You're exercising your freedom to become something new. The anxiety about consistency. Am I being true to myself if I act differently in different situations? Comes from the essentialist assumption that there's a fixed self to be true to. Once you let go of that assumption, you can be fluid, adaptive, and responsive to different contexts without feeling like a fraud. This is liberating. You don't have to defend past versions of yourself. You don't have to maintain consistency with beliefs you no longer hold. You don't have to be the same person you were yesterday. You're free to change, and that freedom is what authenticity actually means. So here's what Sartre's philosophy teaches us about authenticity. The advice to be yourself is based on a philosophical mistake. There is no fixed self to be. You're not a thing with a predetermined nature. You're a process of constant becoming. This doesn't mean authenticity is impossible. It means authenticity is completely different from what modern culture tells us. Real authenticity isn't about discovering and expressing a hidden essence. It's about honestly acknowledging your freedom, taking responsibility for your choices, and creating yourself through action. The search for your true self creates anxiety because you're looking for something that doesn't exist. The relief comes not from finding it, but from accepting that there's nothing to find. You're not discovering yourself. You're creating yourself at every moment through your choices. This is more challenging than the modern version of authenticity. It requires constant awareness and responsibility. You can't hide behind, "This is just who I am." You have to own every choice you make and acknowledge that you could choose differently. But it's also more honest and more empowering. You're not trapped by your nature, your personality, or your past. You're free to become whatever you choose to create through your actions. That freedom is terrifying, but it's also the only genuine form of authenticity available to us. The strongest version of yourself isn't the one who has discovered their true nature. It's the one who honestly acknowledges their freedom, takes responsibility for their choices, and creates themselves consciously rather than hiding behind the illusion of a fixed self. That's what Sartre understood. And that's the authenticity worth pursuing. Have you felt the anxiety of trying to be yourself? Have you struggled with the question, who am I really? Or have you found ways to embrace the freedom of self-creation without needing a fixed identity? I'm genuinely curious about your experience with this. Share your thoughts in the comments. If this video challenged your understanding of authenticity, if it revealed a philosophical depth beneath the self-help platitudes, then you're in the right place. At Depth Doctrine, we examine the foundations that everyone else takes for granted. We don't just repeat popular wisdom, we dig beneath it to find what's really true. Subscribe for more content like this. We have videos coming on why follow your passion destroys lives, the dark side of mindfulness that Buddhists warn about, and why the pursuit of happiness makes you miserable, all going deeper than the surface-level content you see everywhere else. Hit that like button if this made you think differently about authenticity, even if it made you uncomfortable. Your engagement helps this kind of philosophical depth reach more people who are hungry for substance. Until next time, stay curious, stay critical, and remember, depth over surface, always. This is Depth Doctrine. Thanks for going deep with me.